Welcome everyone, but so excited to have you all in this space together with our amazing panelists for this phenomenal conversation about facilitating connection through trust. So just a couple of notes. They're going to provide their introductions in a moment. We've got Brian, Amy, and Keeley with us. But we are going to have a very, what is the word I'm looking for? Participatory conversation, very open dialogue here today. And so I will be walking around with the microphone. If you have a question, please just raise your hand. I will do my darnest to get to you in somewhat of the correct order. But just hold your question until you have the mic so that we can make sure everyone can hear you. But without further ado, with that, we'll start. Go ahead and turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I am excited about how many people are here. I'm going to be honest. Thank you for coming. This is awesome.
Cool. Yeah. So welcome to Facilitating Human Connection Through Touch. I'm Brian Gibney. We're just going to go through the presentation with some quick prompts before we start.
So we are going to ask a few things of you today. And I'll start with that. The first of which is I want to invite everyone to... We're close. Got it. I want to invite everyone to bring their curiosity. First and foremost, it's okay to be critical of things. We want to critically think about things. But the first hat that we're requesting that you wear is a hat about curiosity. It's entirely possible things that we chat about today are going to elicit thoughts, feelings, body reactions, all welcome. But again, that curiosity hat first. The second thing that we're asking of you today is that personal responsibility to self-care. We might make some invitations of you. We genuinely mean that they're invitations, and just as we do with our clients, empowering that personal choice, opt in to whatever feels good. That's your choice, and we want to empower you to do that. So.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. My name is Amy. My pronouns are she, her. We're going to do our intros in a moment. But I wanted to just real quickly share with you the alternative title that we have for this talk is Beyond the Erotic, Out of the Head and Into the Body. And you may have noticed when you walked in here, we had some music going. Dance is a great way to get into the body. This is going to be the first of many invitations right now that we're going to have, or actually that was the first of many invitations, and now a second one. And participation can look like a lot of different ways. Participation can actually look like doing the exercise I'm about to invite you into. It can also look like journaling. It can look like taking a nap. It can look like, anything that feels good in your body, basically. And the choosing is way more important than the doing in this work that we do. The choosing is more important than the doing. So this particular exercise is called ERAP. It stands for Emotional Relating Awareness Practice. And it's super easy to do, and it's also really fun. So the invitation is to just popcorn, shout your answer out along with us about what you're noticing. So I'll give you an example. I'm noticing my toes are actually just slightly numb inside these shoes, right?
I'm noticing butterflies in my stomach and cold in my fingers.
I'm noticing a lump in my throat.
Feel free to shout the thing out all at once. It can be, there's no calling on.
What are you noticing?
I'm noticing my nose is ridiculously cold.
Thank you.
This can be a cacophony of noticings, right?
I'm
It's okay. Make it dirty, make it messy.
I'm noticing.
I'm noticing that I'm excited.
My stomach is so beautiful.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm noticing my fingers are cold.
Would you like something? I'm noticing the fabric on my pants right now.
I'm noticing my heart is beating quickly.
Really good.
I'm noticing the glasses on the bridge of my nose.
Yes.
I'm noticing that I can smell my seatmate's perfume.
Nice. So one thing you might notice is that when you hear somebody else's noticing, it affects your own noticing, right? That's the relatedness part to this exercise. We're all sort of connected through the body, through the skin.
Thank you again for anyone who chose, however you chose to participate in that. Thank you.
So I would like to talk a little bit about the scope and the limitations of this talk. We are talking about a, thank you. Yeah, if I talk too quietly, please let me know. We're talking about a huge swath of different types of practices. This talk is going to be restricted to surrogate partner therapy, somatic sex education, and sexological bodywork, and professional cuddling. But many of us also identify as sex workers. I do want to make a statement saying that, like, it is wonderful as a sex worker to be invited into this space. And I also recognize the privilege that because I appear the way that I do, because I talk the way that I do, I have access to this space. There are many that do not. Sex work is real work, sex work is healing, and sex work is justified no matter who you are. So, another thing about the scope of this is that because we are limiting it to basically 3 or 4 modalities, there are going to be some people that are excluded. We cannot get around that. We do the best we can to open up conversation about other modalities, but that is going to be more than we can talk about in 1 hour.
We also want to make sure that we're speaking from our lived experiences.
Thanks, Lau.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Shall we proceed?
Yeah. So we're introductions. My name is Keeley Shoup. I feel seen by both she and they pronouns. I have been a Cuddle provider for over 7 years. I am now the CEO of Cuddlist, and I am the president of the board of directors for Cuddle Party, which is a non-for-profit organization that teaches boundaries consent. Through this work, I've also gotten to do a lot of advocacy for other Cuddle industries that I'll mention at the end, and other folks who aren't represented here, but are colleagues in the Cuddle world. Let me also talk a little bit about the modality, because I've just said the Cuddle world, and you're all like, what? The world of professional cuddling, or cuddle therapy, is 10 or so years. It's a burgeoning industry. It's fairly new. The crux of it is providing access to platonic touch so that we can build attachment, we can validate the humanity of our clients, we can support them in various ways. The scope is limited to platonic touch, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more and how that plays in folks' experiences. And the industry has some standards for the certification programs that are out there, and there's lots of practitioners who practice individually and somewhat differently. So my perspective on this world, while fairly knowledgeable about it, right, I've been in it for a while, it may vary from person to person, so it's definitely important to recognize that.
Feel complete?
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome, thanks. So my name is Amy Weissfeld, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a lot of things. I'm going to state what some of those things are, because I found that when we name our identities, and we shine a light on some of our power and the power dynamics, it helps us create more agreement, more consensual agreement. So here are the things I am. I am white, I am cis, I am queer, I am poly, I am kinky, and I am able-bodied. I am also a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, an advocate, an educator, and a baby crone, newly identified as a baby crone. I am a certified somatic sex educator and a sexological body worker, and basically that means I provide a sort of compassionate body-based approach to sexual health and wellness. I am trained to provide genital and anal touch upon request for education and for pleasure. My field was originally founded by Joseph Kramer. We grew out of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s, and I really liked what Dr. Bianca said earlier. I have been saying we're trauma-informed, but I'm actually going to change that to saying that this field is trauma transformational.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Brian Gibney, he, him. I am a surrogate partner, intimacy coach, educator, advocate, and also I'm a sex worker. A lot of different flavors of sex worker, anything from erotic modeling to full-service sex worker. I too have a lot of identities, and we can talk about that later, but I do want to talk a little bit more about surrogate partner therapy. So surrogate partner therapy is a modality that is based in touch and relationship that helps clients overcome obstacles to physical or emotional intimacy. These clients often don't have access to what many of us have had, where we can experience these relationship transformational life skills through the active relationship. Surrogate partner therapy always happens in a therapeutic triad, which means there's a collaborating clinician, often a talk therapist, surrogate partner, and a client. There is ongoing and equal exchange of information through all the parties, so there's transparency in the process. In the process, I show up wearing a lot of different hats. Sometimes I'm teacher, sometimes I'm Brian the person. Both have lessons, right? Those dynamics inherently change throughout the process. Where the power dynamic starts off as teacher-student with the client, it necessarily evolves into a more peer-peer relationship. Our goal in surrogate partner therapy is to lower the boundaries or the barriers to authentic relating and pleasure by teaching relationship skills, giving structured physical touch exercises, and also having unstructured experiences as well. Surrogate partner therapy starts, ideally, with an on-ramp of talk therapy, time with a surrogate partner, and then an off-ramp with talk therapy. Right? This is necessary for preparation for the work, to get skills in self-introspection and communication, but also to help the client establish a good, safe relationship with a therapist. And I lost my train of thought. That happens. And then at the end, our goal is to have clients be able to generalize the experiences that they have with us through relationship. This is not a one-off. This is we are teaching clients how to relate to other people, and we're watching how the ripples of this experience that they have with us spread throughout their lives in a lot of different ways, whether it's romantic and sexual relationships, familial relationships, or work relationships. I think that's pretty much it.
Beautiful.
I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about why we're here and how we got here. In 2019, Rasa Chavo invited me and Amy to be a part of a larger group of touch workers in New Orleans talking about how our modalities can influence talk therapy and help clients. That Fall Institute was incredibly powerful. And at the end, there was a call for a special interest group to be made. The therapist said, we don't have access to touch practitioners. How can we bring touch practitioners to our clients in a safe, ethical, informed way? So for the past couple of years, we've been working on creating infrastructure within ASECT and building up membership so we can talk about this, have this conversation. So we love the fact that we're able to be here with you all today, really in our first public way of saying, we're here, and thank you.
This is so big. Y'all, like, this is so big. Thank you all for being courageous enough to show up.
One of our goals in the SIG is to just have dialogue around what we do and how we can help talk practitioners, right? The original Fall Institute was called Bridges to Bodywork, and that's what we'd like to continue here. So, without any further ado, we'd like to have a discussion about it. Do you have any questions about what we do, how we work with clients? Yes, thank you.
So yesterday I went to the session that actually you were in, and you were talking about a specific case. And I noticed, as we all will as therapists or sex educators, have emotions that deal with our clients. We will then process them later on, and we have a code of how to go about that. I'm curious as to how that works for touch practitioners. How, if there is a code, what is it? Is it formalized? And how would you then work with the talk practitioner if you need to figure out your boundaries if they change for clients, so forth and so on?
I've got something. Go ahead.
Those are excellent questions. You have something right now?
For sure, but
Let's go down the line.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Start that way.
So surrogate partner therapy is kind of unique, I think, in the different modalities because we are invited to have our emotional investment in the clients. We're invited to create a relationship with the clients. And that relationship is the work. So the kind of clinical barriers that you all might have that are safe to be in between you and the client, we step over that line intentionally. But that's why the therapeutic triad is so important, right? As we are dancing in relationship with the client, you all have that kind of 1,000-foot up view of how is that relationship working? How is that different from what the client has experienced before? And how does that inform how the relationships are going to be in the future? So yes, surrogate partners do have ethical codes of conduct, and one of it is, a big part of it is the therapeutic triad. Like we have to work within that triad to be safe and ethical. Only in the triad, yes. Because if we are crossing that line, if we are getting very, cultivating an emotional relationship with a client, how can we, as individuals, say when we're wearing a professional hat and when we're wearing a personal hat? Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes when we're really in it, it's not so easy. And it's nice to have someone outside of that relationship to be like, what's going on there? Right? If only to raise the question and bring awareness to it.
And that's how you would say you keep emotional safety?
Yes. That is not just how we keep emotional safety, but that's how we promote safety for the client. Right?
Do you want to go down the line?
Sure. So I'm both a sexological body worker and a somatic sex educator, and I belong to associations for both of those. There'll be a slide at the end that has the links to both of those organizations. In answer to your question, I'll start with the larger, bigger umbrella first, and that is that both of those organizations have codes of ethics that have been developed and that certified practitioners agree to. It's things like, I will wear gloves when providing genital touch as a certified sexological body worker. As a certified sexological body worker, the touch is unidirectional, meaning I can touch my clients with their consent and upon request, but they are not to touch me. I remain fully clothed. I dress kind of like a yoga teacher. So each organization has, sort of its own set of codes and ethics. I also have an intake and waiver form that I require people to fill out and sign, and there are various things that they are agreeing to in that intake and waiver form, one of which is this is not a romantic relationship. I'm not a massage therapist. I'm also not a doctor or a sex therapist. So those sorts of, I sort of think of them as guardrails, are really what help keep the client, I'm just going to say safe enough, right? There's no such thing as safety. What we're trying to do is create places that are safer and braver for our clients to be able to step into.
Yeah. So with this, the question of how do we keep emotional safety, with Cuddle therapy, the swath of the kind of work that we do is quite expansive in anywhere from who's seeking a Cuddle practitioner as part of their routine self-care as if they would a spa, or because it just feels kind of good and they want to go and get a service, to all the way through the gamut to people who are working on really deep, intensive traumas or touch aversions or all the gamut, right? So our model is intentionally and by nature relational, and we are meeting the client a lot in their experience with the framework, and specifically and explicitly the Cuddleist framework, as well as some of the other organizations. It's client-led, and it always starts with an opening agreement. And the key notes of the opening agreement that we share are, we are going to meet each other in authenticity and honesty. I am going to hold all of my well-being and needs sacred and communicate them to you, but that's going to be my responsibility to hold my well-being, and I'm still going to also honestly communicate it to you. I need you to, in the framework that we're working in, also do the best you can to hold your well-being sacred as well, and meet me there so that we can share this experience together. I will be responsible for that container setting, but that is the request, and that is part of the opening ritual for every single session, no matter how many years you see a client. And that ritualized practice of, are we meeting here intentionally? Are we meeting here authentically? How do we build the trust that you know I am going to be taking care of myself so you are not caretaking for me? And I'm trusting and expecting you to show up and bring what's really going on for you to the level you're capable. The second piece, that's like the first piece, the second piece is that it's for the client. We keep several of you might be familiar with Betty Martin work, Wheel of Consent work. We get really clear about the distinction of who is this for, and let that be our guiding light. And then beyond that, it's client-led. We are there to support their experiences. We are there to have, again, hold that sacred space, but we're not instructional, it's not prescriptive. It's not like akin to massage therapy where we're going to be doing these set poses, or now I'm going to take you to spooning, and now we're going to try there are techniques that are helpful in sessions that we can go through. There's like fun cuddle position books. Do you want to play a game? Like going through and rating what you like about each? Like that could be really a fun activity to get new experiences, especially for someone who's had very little touch experience in their life and are looking to gain more language around it. And so our emotional safety is at our boundary level. And part of the training for Cuddleist, for Cuddle Sanctuary of Los Angeles, for Cuddlesage, those certification programs go deep into, as practitioners, how are we living, embodying, and practicing our robust boundaries practices outside of session, and really living and walking that talk in our lives, internalizing that on our own so that we're showing up to sessions with those skills and living them with our clients. So that's how I would say we approach that.
Hi, I'm Patrick. So Brian, I was in your session yesterday, and you made a really compelling case for the fact that surrogate partner therapy and a therapeutic triad is legal. And that I've heard a lot of conflicting information as a sex therapist myself as to, well, what can we do without risking our licenses? And that was the first time I'd heard anyone say that actually you are allowed to do this, and that gave me a lot of hope. So I would love to work with surrogate partners, somatic sex coaches. I really believe in that work, and I think it would really enhance what I do. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that risk for sex therapists. Is there a risk? How do we go about it without breaking the rules?
May I start?
Thank you for this question.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think everybody's going to be thinking about this.
We had it in our notes in case no one asked it. We're like, they're probably going to ask it.
So for those of you who were not in the talk yesterday about the case study, surrogate partner therapy is legal. On the books, it is legal. It means there are no explicit laws forbidding surrogate partner therapy. Most of the misinformation comes when people feel like it should be illegal, right? Listen to the feel, right? Right? So because there is erotic potential in the work, people feel like it is akin to prostitution. The prostitution laws are relevant for surrogate partner therapy. The difference between something like surrogate partner therapy and what is on the books as an illegal activity is that any touch, whether it's erotic or platonic, is in this broader therapeutic context. A client is paying for the therapeutic service, may or may not include a certain amount of touch. Right? From a legal perspective, that the legality has to do with the business transaction of, I give you $500, you're going to give me a blowjob, which just doesn't exist in surrogate partner therapy. There's another layer to that, which is, how is that law perceived and how does it live in reality, right? Just because there are no laws against surrogate partner therapy, and just because I say that you all are safe, doesn't mean there's not going to be some crazy conservative person going, oh, this should be illegal, and we're going to try and make it stick, right? So I want you all to leave the room understanding the real risks that might be around. Surrogate partner therapy, there's never been anybody criminally charged for doing surrogate partner therapy, to referring clients to surrogate partner therapy. That doesn't mean that someone is not going to say one day they're going to get a bug up their ass and they're going to try it, right? Licensing is an entirely different thing, right? I am not on any licensing boards, right? I cannot speak for them, right? Client care is our guiding light as surrogate partners. As clinicians, client care is your guiding light. My feeling is that if you can justify that surrogate partner therapy is the best way for your client to achieve their goals, then it can be ethically justifiable. Doesn't mean there's not going to be someone who's going to get a bug up their ass if they learn about it. There are potential risks, especially depending on where you are in the country. I don't want everybody to leave this room overly confident, but I also don't want them to be scared, right? We are all about risk mitigation and having informed consent, whether it's with clients or with clinicians, right? So do you all want to talk about legality with your specific modalities?
Go ahead. It's a little bit less of a boogeyman and scary when you're talking about cuddle therapy. The platonic borders and boundaries that we put up to explore in that realm are really comforting to a lot of folks. And the definitions of what are sexual are still a really lovely, nuanced conversation that I could have a whole hour long. Join me in that conversation about, because is foot worship sexual to one person or not? But if we're going to specifically stick to the legality, there's no risk that I'm ever aware of, to perceived or culturally or otherwise, besides stigma. But there's no legal risk to you as clinicians or to us.
I think it's not super clear cut, right? It's just like we all used to think there was a binary with race, with gender, with monogamy or non-monogamy. There isn't really a binary here either. It's not, it is or it isn't. It's a whole spectrum. It's a whole rainbow. I've been in this field since 2017. I have not yet heard of anybody being prosecuted for either doing my work or for referring to my work. And again, my work is sexological bodywork and somatic sex education. And as Brian says, that doesn't mean there's no risk. My personal opinion is that there is risk on the other side of that coin too. That there is risk to our clients when we do not let them know that this work is possible, because it really is healing. And for me, healing means providing our clients and ourselves with access to all the parts of ourselves. And that's a really beautiful way to go through life. And it can also be a really hard way to go through life when you don't have access to all the parts of yourself.
I would love to add to that, just very, very quickly. In your code of ethics, code of conduct of the various organizations that you're in, you probably have an ethical responsibility to client care and referring them to professionals, practitioners that have within their scope of expertise things that you cannot do, things that you cannot provide. So it's a balancing act, right? How do you weigh the potential risk and client care with your ethical responsibility to provide the best care to them, which may be referring out to another professional?
I was just curious about, because I live in Texas, which is...
Texas.
There's great things about Texas. There's problems with Texas, but they write their own code of ethics. They don't borrow the national standards. Like, if you do their code of ethics, some politicians with some therapists just wrote the code for uniquely Texas. So I'd be more concerned about a therapist than I would about a prosecutor. So my question is, what would you say is the best resource to educate therapists in a conservative climate to offset some of their anxiety about this?
I am so glad you asked that. The SIG, informing
Which stands
yourself.
for?
The Special Interest Group, thank you. So the Somatic Sexuality Professional Special Interest Group, which is here. It's a great way for you to all have continual education about the different modalities out there. You all are the best way to inform the folks around you about what this work is, right? Get good, real information, disseminate that throughout your communities, and then you won't have to be looking over your shoulder, right? We can have open, honest conversations about this, so it's not done in the closet. We're not looking over our shoulders wondering if someone is going to catch us. Yeah, you are now all officially enlisted in the Army.
Can you talk a little bit about what, I guess, are the characteristics of like an ideal client for this work, and what who would be like maybe not ideal or would need to do some more work before coming to you?
This is one of my favorite questions, and it's one of the most challenging for me to answer because the spectrum of folks I work with are so broad. Some common demographics that I see the most often, folks in any kind of relationship transition, whether it's divorce, breakup, grief, passing away, folks who have just had access to some sort of touch in their life. It is now not available on any kind of consistent steady basis, and all of the trappings or the experiences that come with a relationship, they are in no way ready to process or interested in navigating, but they still have that very human, very understandable, and very real need for touch. Huge demographic. Another really good demographic are people who are traditionally underserved in our communities that don't have access to touch. So folks who are socialized as men typically don't have as much access to touch as women, especially as adults. So those populations who are in high career-focused folks that are very driven in that field, that are also have a lot of decision fatigue, right? There's so much expectations in their world, and they just need a place where they can go and get their needs met. Parents. I have a lot of parents, especially of young children, who experience what we call like a lot of gimme touch. Mm-hmm. All of their tanks are outward. And then if they go in there with their significant other, that touch exchange still has a component of outward. It's still a reciprocity relationship often. And so just carving out a place in their life that is solely for them to receive, and it's designed to be like fucking magical, okay? It's just like, right? How good is that? Like someone's just gonna like pet your hair for like an hour. It's gonna be great. Folks on the autism spectrum who have a lot of sensory, this is one of my demographics that I work closely with, have a lot of sensory and social barriers to touch. We can mitigate so much of that and get unstigmatized access to the specific kind of touch that is accessible to them. So people experiencing depression and anxiety, which like, who isn't? But it does a lot of good to reduce some symptoms, even if it cannot treat it. It really does help them. I'm going to stop there. But when you think in your life of all the applications of where might it be really great for me to just have a really awesome hug, those are my clients. All of you, caregivers.
So I'm open to other interpretations, but this is the metaphor that I use. It's an awesome question. I think of my clients going to sex therapists as if somebody with a broken leg is going to the orthopedic surgeon. They're going to get, kind of put back together, right? They're going to intellectually understand what is all this shit that's happened to me, right? And what can I do about it? And then I compare myself to the physical therapist. The physical therapist is gonna like teach me with my broken leg, now that's been all put back together, how to walk again, how to use my leg, how to like make my gait match so that I don't like end up with this crick in my back, right? So that's what we do, is we help people learn once they know, hey, here's what's happening in my sex life. Here's how to like practice embodiment, practice in my body what it feels like to allow myself to have more pleasure, to allow myself to take more pleasure, to figure out what yes and no feel like in my body. What is it like to actually ask for what I want and get it or not get it, right? So all those skills that are that we really don't practice in the world. Nobody teaches us, like the ABCs of relating, the ABCs of sex in our bodies. That's what all three of our professions really do. I hope that helps.
So surrogate partner therapy has some very clinical beginnings, right? It started with Masters and Johnson back in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was specifically created to treat or help treat male sexual dysfunction, ED, or orgasmic difficulties, right? Things have changed a lot in 50 years. And over the evolution of surrogate partner therapy, there have been a lot more dysfunctions, hate that word, that have been included in that list that folks come to surrogate partner looking for help with. So anything from genital pain, orgasmic difficulties, physical disability, gender orientation, body dysmorphia, and transition. I'm trying to think of some other ones. History of trauma or abuse. There's a whole list of individual problems that come in, that folks come in with. But that's not really what we do. We can't wave our magic wand and say, boom, we're going to fix that. So often what people come into is say, fix my ex so my sex can get better, right? And what we really end up saying is, okay, let's take a step back from the ex and just start off with, what does it feel like to be safe? What does it feel like to be with someone that you trust and you can communicate authentically with? How can you express your wants? How can you express your boundaries? And I'm getting shivers. Something magical happens when clients learn how to do that. Sometimes their ex doesn't become as important as it was before. Sometimes their ex completely disappears. Whoa, my dick's getting hard when I'm not worried about performing for you. Imagine that. or wow, I can have an orgasm with you when I feel safe. Right? I work mostly with AFAB folks, so cis females, non-binary, trans folks, and being socialized females is a little rough, right? They come in and they work with me as a male-bodied person, and they get to experience what it's like to be in a relationship with someone who looks like this. They learn how to say no, right? They learn how to ask for what they want. They learn how to have agency in the relationship. Right? So clients often come in saying, here's my ex, please help me fix my ex. But we also have secret menus of, oh, by the way, I've done this work enough to know that really your ex is about, or maybe about, these other things. Let's go through this process and let's see what comes up. Because as a client goes through the process, they develop more awareness, agency, and capacity. So halfway through the work, they might say, oh, it wasn't about my dick. It was about this thing, right? And then you get to look across from them and you're like, wow, that's great that you're coming to that realization. Saw that coming a mile away. But like them finding it is part of their healing process.
Thank you. It sounds like you do a lot of emotional processing with the clients, just between the 2 or 3 of you, or however many. And I wonder how that kind of ties into us as sex therapists. And like you're doing a lot of the emotional work, then they're coming to us, and maybe we're doing a lot of the emotional work. So how do we collaborate together to kind of delineate my role versus your role to be partners together?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great question, especially for surrogate partner therapy. we are relating to clients and we're saying, this is how it feels to be in the room with you. This is my experience of you, right? We get to model relationship skills. You get to take the 1,000-foot-up perspective, and you get to say, how does it feel to be in the room with Brian, right? How does that relate to all of your other relationships in the past? And how do you want to bring that into relationships in the future?
Do you want to go next or not?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so my model is rather different, and my answer to that is I'm doing as little emotional processing as possible. And I do a lot of referring to therapists, and I get a lot of referrals from therapists, and that is because I'm focused on the embodiment piece. And so I'm doing basically what Resma talked about, if anybody saw that, where he said, basically I'm standing behind the client, and I am encouraging the client to follow their own body and their own pleasure. I care much less about the story and much more about how does that story feel in their body. And that's the level that I work at. That's the level that somatic sex education and sexological body workers work at. Now, sometimes we do have clients who are like, I got to process this thing, right? And to me, that's more like they just have some stuff they want to share. They have some stories that they want to share. But if somebody says to me, I'm feeling really anxious or nervous, my response is, what does that feel like in your body? What are you noticing, right? That's pretty much my standard. If you could boil down what I do, that's what I do. I say, what are you noticing, right?
I would say that traditionally cuddle therapy is closer to sexological bodywork in that way. We do a lot of client-led, get back in your body. Cool, that's what your brain's thinking. Well, get back in your body though. But how's your body feel about that? So we do a whole lot of that, and we're still sitting with unconditioned and positive regard. We're still holding a lot of really expansive empathetic space they can share with us, and then they can also hear our reaction to their share. We're meeting them a lot in that relational space. So the emotional work that therapists can differentiate, whether cuddlists work in a triadic model or not, is case-by-case basis. And so the beautiful processing work that they can do with their clinicians, especially if, with me, they're getting into some of their really intense trauma triggers from their body that a lot of the time they didn't know were there. A lot of the time they don't even have active memories attached to the somatic experiences that are coming up. And then we can stay in, if we need to de-escalate, we can de-escalate, we can be really present in that. And again, that's where the secure attachment stuff comes into play, because it's like, whatever happens here, I'm going to sit with you. I'm not going anywhere, right? Like there's another time next week you can come back or talk about it with your therapist, and whatever you bring here, I'm going to sit with and tell you where my boundaries are around it, and et cetera. So that's kind of what we do.
I was really curious about your experience working with clients who have partners in their life, and what does that look like in your work? What does the homework look like? How is it different? How is it the same?
Can I go? I love it when people's partners send them to me. They're like, I just don't want to do all that cuddling shit with you, honey. Can you go to them and do it? I'm like, yeah, we can totally do that. It doesn't happen quite as often, but I'll also work with couples. And what we do a lot there is deconstructing a lot of what the story behind what all this touch means, and just get into really basic new exercises or new experiences. Okay, so cool. How do we erase all that just for a few minutes and get into what this experience right now of this exact touch feels like? How do you create from scratch in this moment, just in this little 5 minutes, what this authentic connection around this touch feels like? Do you genuinely like that? Or was this a piece of your identity that you thought you needed to have around touch? So we can do that a lot. And it also is true. I don't want to just like rainbows it. There are definitely folks who come to us that have significant other relationship, and they don't inform their significant others about coming to see us because there is something very deeply or fundamentally in their identity or in their experience that is missing from those spaces. And so what it becomes for us, or I'll just speak personally for us, what it becomes for me then is I consider what I do an extension of healthcare in the same way that, like, if their spouse didn't want them to go seek therapy, I still would want them to go seek therapy, and their private personal medical care is their business. So I have a little bit of that approach. However, my boundaries around it are, I need to have a conversation of why, so I understand. I need you to be willing to have a conversation about me, about the risks to me. Is your spouse, am I going to be putting myself in violence's way because of this secret that you're keeping? I am also not promising to keep the secret for you. I'm promising to keep your confidentiality in the way that I keep every client's confidentiality. I'll never divulge it, but I'm never going to lie to anyone for you. I'm never going to go and text someone, I've never seen this person before. Like, that's all weird, and I'm not going to do that. Sorry, that was judgy. I don't mean that. But, so there is an interesting way in which we do sometimes support a person. And the last boundary I have around that is I need to let you know that it may be one of my hopes. You get full choice now. It may be one of my hopes that I can help you in what a conversation and practicing what a conversation could look like if you did talk to your significant other about this work. And I just want to presence that in the room, that you know that I want you to have the most complete and fulfilled picture of your life that you want. And if that piece is missing, it could cause other impacts to your life, and I just want you to have some mindfulness around what other impacts this can have to your life. So yeah, I wanted to presence that.
I'll just say that it is impossible. I really think it's impossible to dive or to feel pleasure unless you feel safe enough in your body. And what creates safety? Choice and voice. Choice and voice are the things that create safety. So I, like Keeley, am encouraging my clients to be as transparent as possible, and like, don't gotta. That's their choice. I also will model and game out, like, let's have that conversation. Like, what do you, and I'll say again, what do you notice in your body, right? Pretend that I'm your partner. What's coming up for you? What are the things that you need in order to feel safe enough to have that conversation or not, right?
This is an especially relevant conversation in surrogate partner therapy, right? Because we are orienting ourselves in relationship with the client, right? If I were to paint a broad picture, I would say surrogate partner therapy is not for partner clients, right? Why is that, right? I want the client to be able to come in and relate to me without any inhibitions to that relation, right? I want them to be able to connect authentically and not worry about what's outside the room. Right? Are there repercussions for what I'm doing here? Right? I also, as a professional, have to ask the question, who is this in service to? And if I am wondering if I am in service to the client's relationship to their spouse or the client's own well-being, that creates a conflict of interest for me. So I want to have clarity in myself of who I'm serving. Right? Makes it a whole lot easier if I don't have to worry about that. That said, I have worked with someone who was partnered before. Right? This person was physically disabled. Their spouse was physically disabled. They were in an ethically non-monogamous relationship. Right? They were used to resourcing different types of affection with other people. And what she said is, listen, I have some really fucked up history in my past. And while we have a good relationship, we can't get to the deep work that I need to do. Right? So we worked together. And what was beautiful about that is the paradigm shift that she experienced in our work together, this shift in her worldview and her self-view, she brought home. She talked to her husband about it. And she said, you know, let's do this exercise called May I Will You. Right? May I Will You. It's a wonderful communication and consent exercise. So that is the ideal situation for if someone decides to work in surrogate partner therapy that is already partnered. It's definitely not the norm, right? It is much more likely that a couple or a client is going to, the spouse of a client is going to come and say, fix my partner for me. That does not feel great. That is a huge red flag. It should be a huge red flag for everybody, for me as a professional and for you as a therapist.
You've alluded to some of these points already, but I'm just curious more explicitly what some of the benefits specific to each of your modalities, or the transformational opportunities specific to each of your modalities are for clients.
There's a lot of overlap. So first of all, there's a ton of overlap. I know that often our conversations and conversations with our surrogate partners, the first stage of surrogate partner therapy can look really similar to professional cuddling. And so there is quite a bit of overlap. However, when the sexuality piece to the client's experience of their life would potentially be a barrier to them getting access still to touch, that can be a really good opportunity for them to either start with me or even do a lot of work with me so that they can access it either with another professional or just in their life. The fact that our playground has that particular fence means that for a lot of folks, even who are navigating a lot of their issues with their sexuality, it means that it has a lower risk barrier of entry. We're in the shallower end of the swimming pool in that way, so that they can do a lot of the different kinds of emotional processing, body processing work that will support that experience for them. Bolster it, give all the boundaries to consent tools, the embodiment of what does a yes feel like in my body, what does a no feel like in my body, what does safety feel like in my body, what does attachment feel like in my body. All of those skills that are completely transferable, but with a lower barrier of risk or the feeling of risk there. I would also say that, no, that feels complete. Yeah. I don't have to belabor it.
Do you want to go or you?
I'll just go real quick, which is access to embodied pleasure. Like that's the main thing, and it's huge because it's kind of like somebody comes in and they're like, well, I just want to work on this one thing. I just want to work on my sexuality, and it's like, I've got a thread in my sweater that I'm pulling, and the next thing you know, like the whole thing is unraveled. It changes how we walk through the world. Yeah.
And as far as surrogate partner therapy is concerned, like there's absolutely overlap with Cuddle, right? The platonic, safe platonic touch. There's absolutely overlap with somatic sex education or sexological bodywork, in that there's erotic touch. But for us, there's two-way touch. We receive touch as well as give touch, which is different. And also that's in the context of the relationship, right? We talk about, we're not just doing prescriptive touch, but we are following wants. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to add.
I want to say one more thing that I forgot to say. When, I don't know an eloquent way to say it, but like some of my favorite clients and most common clients that'll be sent to me are people in the clergy. One of my favorite clients is Catholic priest. I freaking love him to death. But where sexuality isn't, there are either religious, cultural, social, moral, or like internal perception of morality barriers to accessing that. We can be a really great place to still find touch.
I'm just going to say one more thing, which is like oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, inhibit cortisol, lower blood pressure, right? All these things y'all already know.
So I know that y'all probably have plenty of other questions. We're going to pause the questions now, finish up the presentation, and do our closing check-in, right? We all came in and we did our ERAP, right? We talked about what we are aware of happening, what was happening in our body. Notice your body now. Not what you're thinking of, but what's in your body. How does it feel now? How's that different from what you were experiencing before? Don't have to say anything about it, just notice.
Notice your asshole. I know you want to.
Breathe into your pelvic floor. but really don't.
And when you're done noticing your asshole, there are some resources that we would like to offer before we close. First is, through the SIG, we have some quick and easy cheat sheets about what each modality is and how they relate to each other. This is not etched in stone, right? These documents will continue to be edited. I know that I have to edit them with the new update for SSEA. But we will show you a link that you can access the Google Drive for the SIG. So you can download these if you need an extra refresher later on.
Do you have that printed somewhere? Or?
Just wait.
Yeah.
Right there. So, the ASECT Somatic Sexuality Special Interest Group, you can find us, or you can email us at somaticprosig@asec.org. This presentation, as well as those PDFs, can be found using that QR code. And just a quick shout out to Michelle Renee, who is co-chair of the SIG. Some of the best resources are the people, right? Talk to people. Don't just read books or, God forbid, the internet. Like being in community and asking questions is one of the best ways to learn about what we do. There are a lot of different organizations that that have to deal with different types of touch modalities, right? Surrogate Partner Collective, IPSA, Embrace Resource Group, Cuddlist, Cuddle Sanctuary, Cuddle Party, Somatic Sex Educators, and Association of Certified Sexological Body Workers. Again, you will be able to access all of this through that QR code. Definitely look into each one of them. They have different resources available. Many of them have classes that you can do more research in, and some of them are even give ASECT Cs. Finally, we are resources. Reach out to us. We love talking to people. That's why we're here. We love building community. So, myself, Amy Weissfeld, and Keeley Shoup.
Yes, let's give a round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you for your experience, for sharing your experiences and your courage in this work. Our work as sex professionals is being changed because of what you're doing and how much courage it takes to do that. So we see you and we appreciate you. And thank you for coming and having such an open dialogue.
Thank you.